You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Friday, 5th of October. Now a man comes forward in Savile abuse case. White 63-year-old gets ASBO for noisy nights. Young serviceman has had to have surgery after assault in Plymouth nightclub. Report from Nick Griffin MEP on justice and Shieldwall. Al-Qaeda blamed for Europe-wide forest fires. US inflammable flags a sellout in Pakistan. 2 Coptic Christian children have been arrested after playing with rubbish in the street. Camp Bastion troops are now to carry loaded guns at all times. Thought for the day, a short one but deadly. And finally, Swan love split threatens 200-year-old bell ringing tradition. UK news. A school tutor who does not wish to be named has come out and claimed that Jimmy Savile molested him when he was just 12. He's quoted as saying to the Daily Mirror, "We met Jimmy on a day out. I was with my family and he came over and sat with us. I could feel him rubbing my leg under the table and then it moved up to my crotch. When I told my family later, they didn't take it seriously. They said I was imagining it or exaggerating and that Jimmy Savile was a good man. But I've always known he was a paedophile and I'm glad that all of this has finally surfaced." The teacher, now in his 40s, is the first man to allege he was assaulted by the Jim'll Fix It star. Up to now, over 40 women have come forward to accuse Savile of child abuse. Meanwhile, it is reported that a nationwide police inquiry has been launched into Sir Jimmy Savile's alleged reign of child abuse between the 1950s and the 1990s. ASBOs seem to be on the increase for the elderly white people in the UK. Yet another one has been handed out, this time to an unemployed 63-year-old who has been disturbing his neighbours after admitting inviting noisy prostitutes to his home. William Irvin of Walton le Dale near Preston was handed a 2-year ASBO after residents complained to the police about the noise levels. Irvin, unemployed and unable to work due to health issues, admitted to having prostitutes at his home but said he had never had more than 2 girls around at any one time. He is also quoted as saying he cannot now have any more than 2 people other than family in his property between midnight and 7 AM daily. After the hearing he said, "I was having girls around, working girls, ladies of the night. It's not a crime, is it?" A World at 8 reporter commented, "Well, Mr Irvin, if you're white and elderly, it is. As is sending out leaflets pointing out Muslim underage sexual grooming. What I want to know is where are all the noisy neighbours who live next door to the Muslim party houses where young girls are assaulted all night, or don't they make a noise? Not even an ASBO for those bastards." Tony Avery Barker, who survived an IED blast but suffered ear injuries in Afghanistan, was left needing hospital treatment after being attacked in the Venue nightclub in Plymouth on Sunday night. He had gone to meet a girlfriend and after 5 minutes had to go to the gents. There it is reported he was attacked by 3 men. One grabbed his privates and twisted them while another began to beat him. A third also struck him and urinated on the back of his legs. Tony, a gunner with 29 Commando based at the Citadel, said, "I've never seen them before. I put my hands up and said, 'What's all this about?' but they just kept smacking me. The doctor has told me I won't be able to feel my bottom lip or chin again. The attack stretched my jaw and killed the nerves. It's going to affect my career a little bit, but it all depends on how it heals." Anyone with information about the incident should call police on 101 or call Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111, quoting crime reference number EC/12/9356. An unnamed 27-year-old man arrested on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm has been bailed until December the 17th, pending further inquiries. Now I hand you over to Nick Griffin MEP for his Friday report. Today he talks about justice, oppression and the founding of Shieldwall.
An old lady of 73 slapped with a permanent ASBO and a £5,000 cost bill for writing a politically incorrect letter about Muslim groomers to politicians. A hard-working family man hit with an 8-month prison sentence for describing rioters in London as darkies. A young man arrested, his computer seized, and threatened with prosecution over an alleged posting on a Facebook page seen by only a handful of people. 6 patriots on Merseyside arrested, on top of one already in jail for 6 months, as a result of a scuffle with far-left thugs whose own violent assaults on nationalists are ignored or receive a legal caress on the wrist. These shocking examples of naked state repression have all occurred within the last 3 weeks. Having tried and failed to break us with the Equality Commission, black propaganda, and infiltrated troublemakers, the powers that be are now resorting to the criminalisation of political dissent. We have to respond appropriately. While I've been in Brussels this week, my focus and energies have been overwhelmingly directed at matters back in Blighty. I've been busy with preparations for the next stage of our grooming awareness campaign, consulting with colleagues on various aspects of the organisational rebuilding project to which we're devoting a great deal of energy. Most of all, I've been burning the candle at both ends to complete the first stage of a very important project, giving our people the tools and knowledge they need to continue our fight effectively despite the growing threat of police harassment and legal persecution. That project is Shieldwall, the Nationalist Welfare Association. Shieldwall is a political and civil rights legal defence group. The aim of Shieldwall is to help active patriots avoid legal problems where possible, walk free from court if push comes to shove, and come through any sentence unbowed if the worst comes to the worst. Like the independent nationalist trade union Solidarity that I helped found and the British National Party helped nurture some 5 years ago, Shieldwall is a non-party grouping, created to help and involve all genuine nationalists, regardless of organisational rivalries. Naturally, my primary day-to-day loyalty is with the BNP, and I'm bound to fight and oppose the political fossils and the Johnny-come-lately chancers who try from time to time to split our vote. But when it comes to activities such as demonstrations against Islamisation, or any of the other consequences of being ruled by traitors and looters, we have to leave such local rivalries behind us. If the police beat, arrest or jail anyone who's actively standing up for the identity, freedom and rights of our people, then it is an attack on us all. So while we cannot afford and do not want to be associated with cranks, those who would put foreign ideologies and interest groups above Britain, or with people who've ripped us off or use lies to disrupt our party, all genuine and decent nationalists have to grow up, set aside our differences and stand together against the forces of state repression, because division and disunity are fatal to popular resistance movements, which is what we have to be. The longer-term aims of Shieldwall are set out in brief on its Facebook page. The first step, however, which has kept me busy for several weeks now, is the production of an online advice booklet. Arrested, What You Need to Know to Walk Free is a joint work by a group of us who have personal experience of suffering and resisting state persecution for our beliefs and peaceful campaigning. We've included advice from a practicing solicitor, 2 law graduates, British nationalist activists from all over the UK, a former Ulster loyalist POW, who had no compunction in learning from the other side in that conflict, and top members of several 1980s football firms. Nearly all of us have been arrested, questioned and prosecuted several times. So you see, we know what we're talking about. We believe that the resulting 24 pages of advice provide the most comprehensive guide to standing up to and beating state repression ever published in the English language. It shouldn't, of course, be necessary for the leader of a perfectly legal political party, backed by 1 million voters and the soft sympathy of millions more, to invest so much time and energy in producing a guide for people who get arrested. In a decent society, the only people who should fear the police and the courts should be criminals. But, as you know, we're not in a decent society. There was a time when, for all its faults, Britain was the fairest, most decent, most properly run little corner of the planet. There was a time when our homes were our castles and we were free to speak our minds. But the liberal left elite have ruined it all. So now we are the abused and oppressed peasant subjects of a corrupt and selfish regime. We are ruled by a gang of criminals who see the abolition of our freedoms and of our very identity as essential to the security of the gigantic looting operation being run by their corporate masters. That is why the thieving elite and their controlled media accomplices think that it's necessary to sweep under the carpet the tragically iconic case of Charlene Downs, rejecting the evidence that cries to heaven for a retrial for the men accused of her brutal murder. Yet, at the same time, they send 10 armed anti-terrorist police officers to drag from her bed and arrest in a dawn raid a lady pensioner for the crime of writing a letter about the cruel injustice that allows young English roses to to be treated and butchered as meat by savages. Let me make it crystal clear. We're not producing this anti-interrogation manual, as some establishment hack is sure to allege, because we are going underground or preparing for terrorism. Despite the unfairness of their rigged electoral system, we remain committed to the democratic electoral road. Despite the violence and persecution they throw at us, we remain committed to peaceful direct action and positive work on behalf of our communities. We are not turning from dissent to violence or criminality, but merely responding to the state's moves to criminalise our legitimate and peaceful opposition. I hope that, as soon as you've finished listening to this, you will go to www.facebook.com/Shieldwall Nationalist Welfare Association, all one word, and download your own copy of Arrested. Although it's taken a lot of effort to produce such a detailed work, we're providing it absolutely free for everyone who may one day need it, because this isn't about money, it's about freedom and justice. And who might need it? The realistic answer is everyone. You. Because in crazy, upside-down, rotten-to-the-core PC Britain, you don't have to be a dangerous radical like me or Margaret Walker to find yourself on the wrong side of the so-called law. Freeborn Britons have had their front doors kicked in and been dragged off for interrogation for the hate crimes of offering a workmate the wrong-coloured jelly baby, arguing with ethnic traffic wardens, and being rear-ended by non-Indigenous drivers. To rework the old song, being British means they're guilty, so we're guilty, one and all. So read Arrested and remember its advice, because it comes from dearly bought experience, and pass it on to as many members of our community as possible, because no one can tell when they'll be grateful to you, but that day will come sooner than they think. We will now be turning our attention to producing a similar guide to staying out of trouble in the first place. While we decry the wave of attacks on our freedom, we have to acknowledge that, all too often, our people present our persecutors with an open goal. If you overreact to police provocation at a demonstration, if you break PC, religious, or racial comment taboos on your Facebook page, if you lose your temper with one of the UAF Cameron Miliband militia gang and deck them for spitting at a war veteran, then you will end up needing to know what to do when arrested. And even knowing the ropes may not be able to save you from getting a criminal record. So think before you speak and write. And don't object to or fret about the tighter web comment moderation guidelines we are having to impose in the wake of Mike Coleman, one of the best counsellors and finest men it's been my privilege to work with in the BNP, getting an 8-month sentence for using the harmless Stoke term darkie on a blog read by local people who use that term routinely and without a shred of malice. Above all, remember that we're not here to put ourselves at greater risk than we have to just in order to provide a sounding board for the understandably angry and frustrated. We are here to build the power-winning, tyranny-defying machine we need to fight for and restore freedom of speech for all, and to put right the terrible and endless wrongs that drive decent people to understandable rage. We all have that rage, but we must keep it in our hearts and not let it out in careless words, still less rash deeds. Be proud of that rage, because it means that you're still alive, that you still have honour and decency, but keep it hidden inside as a secret weapon. Channel it, turn it into energy for constructive tasks to help us make things better again. Turn it into the passion you need to keep your soul warm enough to resist the icy grip of despair at occasional setbacks and betrayals. Turn it into the defiance that allows you to look the most powerful enemy of our cause full in the face and know that, while they have the power of an overmighty state on their side, we have right and truth and natural justice on ours, and our time will come.
Thank you very much, Nick. Now we have some guidance for what could happen to us. World news. Al-Qaeda has been blamed for a recent series of forest fires across Europe, as the head of Russia's Federal Security Service claimed that they were set by arsonists as part of the group's low-cost attack strategy. One should note that setting fires to forests in the countries of the European Union is a new tendency in Al-Qaeda's strategy of 1,000 cuts. This method allows Al-Qaeda to inflict significant economic and moral damage without serious preliminary preparations, technical equipment or significant expenses. In linking Al-Qaeda to the deadly wildfires, Mr. Bortkinov pointed to calls to launch a forest jihad by various extremist websites, which he said also published detailed instructions about how and where to best carry out arson. Deadly fires have swept through forest land in EU countries such as Portugal and Spain over the last few months, killing scores of people and forcing thousands to evacuate. In Pakistan, the US flags are a hot item. In fact, they're burnt by the thousands in protest against the movie on Muhammad. The student wing of the Shiite party Majlis-e-Wahdatul Muslimin, for example, has stated that in most active days of protest reached a peak production of 500 per hour. That same group has produced a US flag. Every stars and stripes fetches between 120 and 1500 rupees, 1 to 12 euros. But often the parties and the various religious movements buy entire stocks to be distributed to the protesters. British troops are carrying loaded weapons at all times inside Camp Bastion to protect themselves against insider attacks by rogue Afghan soldiers and policemen. Servicemen and women moving around Britain's main base in Afghanistan have been told to carry their personal firearms following a spate of green-on-blue murders in which Allied troops are murdered by the local forces they are training. A World Day spokesperson commented, "Would you turn your back on one of these people holding a gun?" Two Coptic Christian children, Nabil Naji Riz, 10, and Mina Nadi Farag, 9, were arrested on Tuesday for insulting the Muslim religion in the Upper Egyptian Governorate Beni Suef after the imam of their local mosque filed a complaint against them. The village imam, Ibrahim Muhammad Ali, accused them of tearing up papers which included pages of Quranic verse. Ali initially took the children to the church and requested that the priest punish them, but was refused. Nabil's father, Nagi Riz, defended the action of the boys in a public statement, explaining that they are illiterate and therefore did not know the content of the papers which they found in a small white bag as they were playing near a pile of rubbish in the street. A spokesman for the World Today said, "Well, after all, they were playing with rubbish." Turkey's parliament voted Thursday to authorise military cross-border operations into Syria, a day after an apparently errant mortar strike from inside Syria killed 5 Turkish civilians. Deputy Prime Minister Beser Atalay told the Associated Press that the 320-129 vote is not for war but is intended to deter Syria from further violence that could spill over the border. Thought for the day, a short one but deadly. I am concerned as anyone about the whereabouts of little April Jones, who has gone missing, been abducted or simply killed. She was with friends near her Plymouth home, I can't say that because I'm not Welsh, when she got into a van at 1900 hours on Monday. Now is it me or am I too bloody old for this, but should a 5-year-old with health problems be out of sight with friends her own age, and I mean very young, in a place that obviously has back gardens and space? She's not an inner city child who has had to play where she could, but she lives in the Welsh valleys. I never let my daughter out of my sight at that age, unless in the garden, and even then her brother was with her. I was far from the perfect mother, being a selfish individual, but I can never understand the way some people let these very young children out of their sight. We have the very well-known couple holidaying in Portugal who left their twins and very young daughter whilst they went out for a meal. Not far, but out of sight. There was that couple in Greece who left their daughter of 3 by a main road. One of the main points being that you cannot guard your daughters every day when they're older. They must make their own mistakes, and they invariably do. But when they are under 6, I really think you should watch out for them and make it draconian. You only have to turn your back, even in your own home in some awful previous cases. Do you remember the little girl of 9 who was taken from her own bed during her parents' party by a retarded relation? Children move quickly, but adults move even quicker. The awful part about April is that her parents are obviously beside themselves and cannot see what they have done or not done. If you send out a child of 5, even with friends, she is vulnerable, as indeed they are. It is a delight for paedophiles on a plate. How many tragic cases would have been avoided had these children played near a home, or indeed in the home? Meanwhile, we have histrionics from neighbours, relations and indeed people who didn't even know the little mite. There will be a vast array of teddy bears, flowers and messages, and therapists will be flown in to the school children to come to terms with what? The fact that her mother let her down? It may be harsh, but children are at more risk today than in the good bad old days. The web, films and the media in general promote young children, and they are sexualised as far as looks go at a very early age. especially in the social section that most of these poor little mites seem to hail from, the land of X Factor and the celeb culture. It is all a paedophile's dream, and these paedophiles can come from within the family or the communities. I hope they find April soon, but I fear they won't, or it will be too late. I hope this man they have arrested has done the crime, because he has been vilified in the press and his every movement checked. He is guilty as far as the public and media are concerned. Now this has a twofold pincer movement. First, if not guilty, he can sue the press, and secondly, whilst the police are paying attention to him, they could be ignoring other avenues. The other point is that whilst we have April and Jimmy Savile all over the news, have you noticed the Muslim sexual grooming has died off in a big way? Now we have white paedophiles and white underage sexual abusers, as if we never had them in the past. They, unfortunately like the poor, will always be with us, and the press have never been on the publishing picture spree like it. The most the prosecuted Muslims got was a small passport-like picture at the bottom of a page at the end of a show trial. Now we can do better than that for our own, can't we? And finally, the 200-year tradition of swans pulling a rope, which sounds a bell, to get food, is in jeopardy after the male swan, Bertie, has dumped his partner, Vicky. The mute swans have been trained to use the bell and are world famous. They draw thousands of visitors every year to the moat around the Bishop's Palace in the Diocese of Bath and Wells. These two swans were only introduced in June this year after one of the previous swans died and his partner was rehomed, and have been struggling with their bell ringing after they were frightened by a pair of resident ducks. Oh bless them. They'll have to get him a new mate, won't they? Or will they leave Bertie to do the pulling? I couldn't resist it. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart, and I and the team at World at 8 and Radio Britain wish you all a very happy and a very safe weekend.